The morning alarm echoed through the halls of Nexus Prime, the giant space station that served as home to the Galactic Council. Velkin Thross stretched his scaled arms and checked his security reports. As head of station security, he made the same walk every day through the diplomatic quarters. Today felt different, though he could not say why. The human section was always his first stop. Ambassador Jiho Park and his team had lived there for 3 years, and Velkin had grown used to seeing them in the corridors. The humans were quiet people, always polite, always helpful. They solved problems that other species could not fix. They made peace between enemies who had fought for centuries. But today the human quarters were empty. Velkin stood in the doorway of Jiho's room, his reptilian eyes scanning the space. Everything was gone, not just packed away but completely removed. No furniture, no personal items, no clothes in the closets. Even the wall decorations had been taken down. It looked like no one had ever lived there at all. He moved to the next room where Deputy Ambassador Mina Lee had stayed. Empty. The same clean, bare walls stared back at him. Room after room told the same story. 12 humans had lived in this section. Now there was no trace of any of them. Velkin's comm device buzzed. "Security Chief," came the voice of Docking Bay Controller Nizek. "The human ship is gone." "Gone? When did it leave?" "That's the problem, sir. It never filed a departure request. The Soul's promise just isn't here anymore. No launch signals, no communication, no record of movement. It's like it vanished." Velkin felt a cold chill run down his spine. Ships did not just disappear, especially not diplomatic vessels with full crews. 2 hours later, the Galactic Council was in emergency session. Chancellor Zaris, the tall insect-like leader of the council, clicked her mandibles in annoyance as she addressed the assembled representatives. "This is clearly a negotiation tactic," she said, her voice buzzing through the translation system. "The humans are trying to pressure us about the mining rights dispute." Trade Minister Gornak, whose crystal body reflected the chamber lights, hummed in agreement. "They want better terms for the silicon trade. This disappearance is meant to show us how much we depend on their mediation services." But not everyone agreed. Dr. Liara Vestin, a small fox-like Finari, stood up from her seat. "With respect, Chancellor, this doesn't match human behavior patterns. In 50 years of contact, they have never used dramatic gestures. They prefer quiet diplomacy." "Perhaps they have learned new tricks," Zaris replied dismissively. Communications Officer Taldock raised one of his 4 arms. The blue-skinned officer looked worried. "I have tried to contact Earth and all human colonies. No response from any of them." The chamber fell silent. 47 different species stopped their chattering and looked at Taldock. "What do you mean, no response?" asked General Craxon, the massive bear-like Ursoid military leader. "I mean complete communication blackout. Not just Earth, but every human settlement, every human ship, every human station. They are all quiet." Dr. Vestin felt her fur stand on end. "How many human settlements are there?" Taldock checked his display. 312 colonies, 47 research stations, and approximately 8,000 ships of various sizes. All silent. The numbers hung in the air like a weight. No one spoke for a long moment. Chancellor Zaris tried to maintain control. There must be a technical explanation. Solar storms, perhaps, or some kind of communication interference. "I checked for that," Taldock said quietly. "The communication networks are working fine. It's just that no humans are using them." Captain Morgek of the Hydrozoan delegation raised a tentacle. His water-filled breathing apparatus bubbled as he spoke. "Could they have been attacked? Invaded by some unknown force?" "By who?" asked Minister Gornak. "And how could someone attack over 300 worlds without us detecting a single battle?" Velkin shared his security findings with the Council. The forensic teams had found no signs of struggle in the human quarters. Personal belongings had been carefully removed, not hastily abandoned. Even the trash had been emptied and the recycling systems cleared. "It's like they planned this," he reported. "Every human facility on this station was systematically emptied. They took everything that belonged to them and left nothing behind." A young crystalline engineer named Veek spoke from the observer section. "What about the quantum processors they maintain for us? The medical equipment they service? The translation algorithms?" Silence fell again. The truth was starting to dawn on them. The humans did not just live in the galaxy, they maintained it. Their quiet efficiency had become invisible to most species, but now that they were gone, the gaps were obvious. Dr. Veston accessed her personal files. According to my records, humans are involved in the maintenance of over 60% of our critical systems. They designed our power distribution networks. They created the software that runs our communication systems. They even helped build this station. Surely other species can take over these functions, said Chancellor Zaris. But her voice lacked confidence, can they? Asked Dr. Veston. When was the last time any of us tried to understand how these systems actually work? We just assumed the humans would always be there to fix problems. The reality was uncomfortable. For 50 years, humanity had quietly woven itself into the fabric of galactic civilization. They had not conquered or demanded tribute. Instead, they had made themselves useful, reliable, and trusted. They solved problems before others even noticed them. They prevented conflicts before they started. They fixed things that broke, and now they were gone. As the council session continued, reports began coming in from across the galaxy. Human-run hospitals had shut down overnight, leaving patients without treatment. Human-maintained trade routes had gone unpatrolled, and pirates were already taking advantage. Research stations that depended on human expertise had ceased operations. The scope of the crisis was becoming clear. Humanity had not just left the Galactic Council. They had left civilization itself, and they had done it so quietly, so completely, that no one had even noticed until it was too late. Chancellor Zaris called for a recess, but as the representatives filed out of the chamber, one question echoed in every mind. Why had the humans left? And more importantly, what were they going to do without them? The Great Silence had begun, and the galaxy was about to learn just how much they had depended on the quiet species from Earth. 3 weeks had passed since the humans disappeared, and the galaxy was beginning to crack. Trade Coordinator Zilvan floated in his water tank, reviewing the economic reports that grew worse each day. The aquatic hydrozoan's tentacles moved frantically as he processed the data. Supply chains that had worked smoothly for decades were falling apart. The quantum processor shortage is critical, he reported to the emergency council meeting. Without human manufacturing, we have no way to replace the processors that run our shipping computers. 12 major trade routes have already shut down because their navigation systems failed. Chancellor Zaris clicked her mandibles nervously. Surely other species can learn to make these processors. The crystallines have tried, Zilvan replied. Their best engineers say it will take at least 2 years to understand the human designs. The processors that are failing now will not wait 2 years. Dr. Liara Veston stood up from her seat. The small Fenari had bags under her eyes from lack of sleep. The medical situation is worse. Human-developed regenerative serums were being used to treat over 40 different species. My hospital has already run out. Patients who were scheduled for organ replacement surgery cannot be treated. She paused, her voice growing quiet. 3 patients died yesterday because we could not regenerate their damaged tissue. They were young. They should have lived for another century. The chamber fell silent. Death had always been part of life, but preventable death felt different. General Craxon cleared his throat. The massive Ursoid looked uncomfortable in his formal uniform. The military situation is also concerning. Humans provided defensive technology to many species. Shield generators, early warning systems, tactical computers. Without maintenance and updates, these systems are failing. What does that mean? Asked Minister Gornak. It means that 17 species are now defenseless against attack. The Vorthon pirates have already raided 3 colonies that used to be protected by human-supplied shields. Captain Thorek, an Ursoid freighter pilot, had been granted permission to address the council. He stood at the speaker's platform, his brown fur showing streaks of gray from stress. I have flown cargo ships for 30 years, he said. For the last 15, I have relied on human navigation systems to fly through dangerous space. These systems could predict asteroid movements, solar storms, and pirate activity. 2 days ago, my system failed while I was crossing the Kelon Nebula. He showed the council a bandaged arm. I barely made it out alive. My cargo was destroyed, and my ship needs major repairs. The route I have used safely for years is now too dangerous to fly. The personal stories continued throughout the day. Veek, the young crystalline engineer, explained how his prosthetic arm was losing functionality without software updates. The arm had been damaged in an accident, and human technology had given him back full mobility. Now the delicate motors were starting to fail. The diagnostic software was designed to learn from my movements, he said. Without updates, it cannot adapt to changes. Soon I will lose the use of my arm again. Dr. Nisa, a Fenari physician, reported that her supply of antiviral compounds was running low. Human researchers developed treatments for diseases that affect multiple species. Without these compounds, we will see the return of plagues that we thought were eliminated forever. But the problems went deeper than individual hardships. The infrastructure that held galactic civilization together was starting to fail. Chief Engineer Morkad, a thick-skinned Rockarian, delivered the most disturbing report of all. Nexus Prime itself is in danger. The power conduits that supply energy to this station were designed by humans. They used a quantum distribution system that no other species fully understands. He displayed a holographic schematic of the station's power grid. These conduits are starting to show signs of instability. Without human engineers to maintain them, we estimate that main power will fail within 6 months. Chancellor Xeris stared at the display. Are you saying that our capital, the center of galactic government, will become uninhabitable? That is exactly what I am saying, Morkad replied. The database systems were also failing. The vast libraries of information that the Council used for research and decision-making had been built on human-created architecture. Without maintenance, data was becoming corrupted. Historical records, scientific research, and legal documents were slowly disappearing into electronic noise. Archivist Tendel, one of the long-lived Eternals, had spent days trying to preserve what he could. We are losing knowledge faster than we can save it. The translation algorithms that allow different species to understand each other are degrading. Soon we may not even be able to communicate effectively. The psychological impact was also becoming clear. Cultural attaché Falara, an empathic Valdari, reported that stress and anxiety levels were rising across all species. Humans served as emotional stabilizers during negotiations, she explained. They had a calming influence that prevented conflicts from escalating. Without them, old tensions are returning. Species that have been allies for decades are starting to argue over resources. The arguments had already begun within the Council itself. The Saurian delegation demanded military expansion to fill what they called the human vacuum. The crystalline representatives wanted to close their borders and protect their own interests. Smaller species were forming defensive alliances, afraid of being attacked by their larger neighbors. Commander Zathan, an aerial Terran, had led a search expedition into human space. His report was perhaps the most disturbing of all. We found their worlds, he said, his wings folded tightly against his back. Every human colony we visited was intact but empty, cities with power still running but no people, spaceports with ships still docked but no crews. It is as if they simply walked away from everything they built. Any signs of violence, disease, natural disaster? Asked Dr. Veston. Nothing. Food was still fresh in some places. Personal belongings were left behind. Children's toys in playgrounds, books open on tables, computers still running. It looked like they just left. The expedition had visited 12 human worlds. All showed the same pattern. Complete abandonment, but no signs of struggle or disaster. Did you find any messages? Any explanation for why they left? Commander Zathan shook his head. Nothing. Not a single clue about where they went or why they decided to leave. As the reports continued, the scope of the crisis became clear. Humanity had not just been members of galactic society, they had been its foundation. Their quiet competence had allowed other species to focus on politics, trade, and culture without worrying about the technical details of running a civilization. Now those details were catching up with them. By the end of the emergency session, panic was starting to set in. Supply chains were broken, infrastructure was failing, and old conflicts were returning. The species that had worked together peacefully for decades were beginning to eye each other with suspicion. Chancellor Xeris tried to maintain order, but even she could see that the Galactic Council was starting to fracture. Without human mediation, every disagreement became a potential crisis. As the representatives filed out of the chamber, one terrible truth was becoming obvious. The humans had not just left the galaxy. They had left the galaxy to face the consequences of its own dependence. And those consequences were only just beginning. The lights flickered in the council chambers for the third time that morning. Chief Engineer Morkad looked up from his maintenance console with growing alarm. The power grid failures were happening more often now, and he was running out of solutions. 2 months had passed since humanity's disappearance, and the infrastructure problems were getting worse. The quantum power conduits that supplied energy to Nexus Prime were failing faster than anyone had predicted. Without human engineers to maintain the delicate quantum fields, the entire system was becoming unstable. "We need to evacuate non-essential personnel," Morkad told Chancellor Zaris during an emergency briefing. "The risk of catastrophic power failure is increasing daily." "How long do we have?" she asked, her insectoid features showing strain. "Maybe 3 months, maybe less." The Chancellor looked around the nearly empty briefing room. Half of the Council representatives had already returned to their home worlds. The crystalline delegation had recalled their entire diplomatic corps. The Saurians were mobilizing their fleet for territorial expansion. Even loyal allies like the Fenari were making preparations to defend their own worlds. Dr. Liara Veston was one of the few who remained. The Fenari scientist had been working around the clock to understand the scope of their dependency on human technology. Her findings were disturbing. "I have analyzed the database corruption patterns," she reported. "We are not just losing data randomly. The human-designed systems are failing in a specific sequence. It is almost like they were designed to shut down if not properly maintained." "Are you suggesting the humans planned this?" asked General Craxon. "I'm suggesting they were much more careful than we realized. Every system they built for us had safeguards. Nothing would work indefinitely without their involvement. The communication networks were among the worst affected. The quantum entanglement systems that allowed instant communication across the galaxy were breaking down. Species that had been able to talk to each other instantly now faced delays of weeks or months for messages to travel by conventional means. Cultural attaché Falara had noticed another troubling development. Without the emotional stability that humans provided during negotiations, ancient prejudices were returning. Species that had worked together peacefully were now viewing each other with suspicion and fear. "The Ursoids are demanding territorial concessions from their neighbors," she reported. "The Hyder zones have closed their trade routes to all non-aquatic species. Even the peaceful Valdari are talking about forming military alliances." The breakdown was not just technical, it was social and political as well. Archivist Tyndall had made a discovery that sent chills through everyone who heard it. The Ancient Eternal had been researching historical records before they were lost to database corruption. "I have found references to previous human disappearances," he announced during a council session. "This is not the first time humans have vanished from galactic civilization." The remaining council members leaned forward in their seats. "How many times?" asked Dr. Veston. "At least 4 that I can document, possibly more. Each time follows the same pattern. Humans appear in the galaxy, help younger species develop technology and culture, become integrated into civilization, then disappear completely." "How long ago was the last disappearance?" asked Chancellor Zaris. "Approximately 12,000 years ago, before most of our current civilizations reached spaceflight." The implications were staggering. Humanity had been playing this role for millennia, appearing and disappearing like cosmic gardeners tending to the growth of galactic civilization. "Why do they leave?" asked General Craxon. "The records are incomplete, but they suggest that humans disappear when civilizations become too dependent on them. When species stop developing their own capabilities and rely entirely on human solutions." Dr. Vestan felt a cold realization dawning. They are not abandoning us. They are trying to make us independent. Meanwhile, the practical problems continued to mount. Veek, the young crystalline engineer, had lost the use of his prosthetic arm completely. But instead of giving up, he had begun working with other engineers to reverse engineer the human technology. "We have been approaching this wrong," he explained to a group of technical specialists from various species. "We have been trying to copy human designs exactly. But we are not humans. We should adapt their ideas to work with our own strengths." His team had made some progress. By combining crystalline mathematical abilities with Fenari intuition and Ursoid mechanical skills, they were beginning to develop alternatives to human technology. The results were different from human designs, but they worked. Captain Thorek had also adapted to the changing situation. When his human navigation system failed completely, he had learned to navigate using a combination of hydrozoan biocompass techniques and traditional star charts. His new methods were slower and more dangerous, but they were his own. "I spent 15 years depending on human computers to tell me where to go," he admitted to other pilots. "I forgot how to read the stars myself, but I am learning again." Dr. Nisa had made similar discoveries in medicine. When her supply of human antiviral compounds ran out, she began experimenting with traditional Fenari healing methods combined with Valdari empathic therapy. The treatments were not as effective as human medicines, but they were better than nothing. "We have been using human solutions for so long that we forgot our own medical traditions," she realized. Maybe it is time to remember what our ancestors knew. But not everyone was adapting well. Many species were struggling with the psychological impact of suddenly being forced to solve their own problems. Depression and anxiety were common. Some individuals retreated into isolation, unable to cope with the loss of human support. The political situation was becoming dangerous. Without human mediation, territorial disputes were escalating into armed conflicts. The Saurian Empire had already invaded 3 systems that had been under human protection. The Crystalline Collective was refusing to trade with anyone, hoarding resources for their own use. General Kraxon found himself in the uncomfortable position of trying to maintain peace without human diplomatic support. "We are seeing conflicts that have not occurred in 50 years, he reported. Species that trusted human judgment are now unwilling to trust each other. The worst part was the growing desperation. As infrastructure continued to fail and conflicts increased, some species were beginning to blame each other for humanity's disappearance. Conspiracy theories spread about who had driven the humans away. Chancellor Xeris struggled to maintain the Council's authority as member species withdrew or became hostile to each other. The unity that had defined galactic civilization for half a century was crumbling. But in the midst of the chaos, some individuals were beginning to understand the lesson humanity had tried to teach them. Dr. Veston spent her days working with engineers and scientists from multiple species, sharing knowledge and developing new solutions. Instead of depending on human expertise, they were learning to depend on each other. "Maybe this is what the humans wanted," she suggested during one of their collaborative sessions. "Not for us to depend on them forever, but to learn to work together without them." The idea was frightening and hopeful at the same time. For 50 years, humans had served as the glue that held galactic civilization together. Now the other species would have to learn to be their own glue. Whether they would succeed or tear each other apart remained to be seen. But for the first time since humanity's disappearance, some individuals were beginning to see the departure not as abandonment, but as a challenge. The question was whether the rest of the galaxy would understand before it was too late. Dr. Khyven Rask studied the ancient ruins through his analytical sensors. The synthetic being had joined the archaeological expedition to Earth, hoping to find answers in humanity's abandoned homeworld. What they had discovered was more disturbing than anyone had expected. "These structures are definitely human," he reported to the expedition team, "but they are much older than our records suggest. This settlement predates known human civilization by at least 20,000 years." Professor Wellara, a memory-gifted mnemonic, touched the carved stone walls with her sensitive fingers. Her species could read psychic impressions left behind by other beings. "There are layers of memories here. Humans lived in this place for centuries, then left suddenly. But the strangest thing is that this pattern repeats. Multiple human civilizations have occupied this same site." The expedition had been organized by the few remaining council, members who believed that understanding humanity's past might explain their present absence. Led by Dr. Veston and funded by desperate governments, they had traveled to dozens of worlds that showed signs of ancient human habitation. The pattern was always the same. Evidence of human settlements dating back hundreds of thousands of years, all showing the same characteristic: sudden abandonment at the height of prosperity. Linguist Voxel, a translation specialist, had spent weeks deciphering fragments of ancient human text found in deep archives on Earth. His discovery had shaken the entire expedition. "The humans knew this would happen," he announced during the team's evening briefing. "These records describe what they call the Gardener Protocol. Humans serve as shepherds for developing civilizations, helping them grow until they become strong enough to survive independently. So they leave when civilizations mature? Asked Dr. Veston. Not exactly. According to these fragments, they leave when civilizations become dangerously dependent. When species stop innovating and rely entirely on human solutions for their problems. Professor Wallara nodded grimly. The memories I have read support this. In every case, the humans seemed sad to leave, but determined that it was necessary. Back on Nexus Prime, the situation had become critical. The power failures were now daily occurrences. Chancellor Zaris had been forced to relocate the Council to emergency facilities. Most government functions had been suspended as species withdrew to protect their own interests. War Minister Dracor of the Ursoid Empire had taken advantage of the chaos. His fleets were expanding aggressively into territories that had been under human protection. 3 star systems had already fallen to Ursoid control, and more invasions were planned. The humans are gone, he declared to his military council. This is our chance to claim what should have been ours all along. The weak species that hid behind human protection will now face reality. The Crystalline Collective had taken a different approach. They had sealed their borders completely, refusing all contact with other species. Their worlds had become isolated fortresses, protected by automated defenses but cut off from galactic civilization. Smaller species like the Fenari and Valdari were struggling to survive. Without human protection and support, they were vulnerable to both military aggression and economic collapse. Many had formed desperate alliances, pooling their resources in an attempt to maintain their independence. But not everyone was giving up. The collaborative group that had formed around Dr. Veston and Veek had grown into a significant research organization. Scientists, engineers, and innovators from multiple species were working together to solve the problems that humanity's departure had created. We have made a breakthrough in power generation, announced Veek during one of their meetings. By combining crystalline quantum mathematics with Fenari bioenergy principles, we have developed a new type of fusion reactor. The design was completely different from human technology, but it worked. More importantly, it could be built and maintained by non-human species. Dr. Nisa had achieved similar success in medicine. Traditional Valdari empathic healing, when combined with hydrozoan biochemistry and Fenari herbalism, can treat diseases that we thought required human medicine, she reported. Captain Thorak had helped develop new navigation techniques that used the natural abilities of multiple species. Fenari intuition could predict stellar phenomena, while crystalline calculations could chart optimal courses through dangerous space. We are not trying to replace human technology, Dr. Veston explained to those who would listen. We are developing our own solutions using our own strengths. The collaborative approach was working, but it was slow and difficult. Many species were too proud or too afraid to share their knowledge with others. Old prejudices and territorial instincts were stronger than the desire for cooperation. The archaeological expedition had made another discovery that cast humanity's role in a new light. Deep in the ruins of an ancient library on Earth, they found records of other species that humans had helped in the distant past. These are not just human records, Professor Wallara realized as she read the psychic impressions. These are testimonies from species that went through the same experience we are having now. They describe the pain of losing human guidance, but also the growth that came afterward. One record, carved in stone and preserved for millennia, particularly struck the team. It was written by a species that had disappeared from the galaxy long before current civilizations arose. The humans came to us when we were young and taught us to reach for the stars. They showed us wonders we never could have imagined alone. When they left, we cursed them as abandoners and betrayers. But in time, we learned that their greatest gift was not their knowledge, but their faith in our ability to grow beyond what we thought possible. What happened to that species? Asked Dr. Veston. Voxel checked the historical databases that were still functioning. They evolved beyond physical form about 50,000 years ago. According to the records, they achieved a level of development that allowed them to exist as pure consciousness. The last entry suggests they joined the humans as cosmic gardeners. The implications were staggering. Humanity was not unique in their role as shepherds of civilization. They were part of a larger cycle of growth and mentorship that spanned millions of years. So the species that humans help eventually become helpers themselves? Asked Dr. Veston. It appears so. The cycle continues, with each generation of species helping the next to grow and develop. Meanwhile, the immediate crisis continued to worsen. Nexus Prime finally lost main power, forcing the evacuation of all remaining personnel. The great symbol of galactic unity was now a dark, lifeless structure drifting through space. Communications between star systems had become so unreliable that some species were completely cut off from galactic news. Trade had collapsed almost entirely. Several worlds were experiencing famines as their food distribution systems failed. But in the darkness, small lights were beginning to shine. The collaborative research group had established emergency shelters for refugees from failed systems. Their new technologies were being shared freely with any species willing to learn. Vik had successfully created a new type of prosthetic that worked even better than his original human-made arm. More importantly, he had taught dozens of other disabled individuals how to build and maintain their own devices. Captain Thorak had organized an independent shipping network that used the new navigation techniques. His ships were slower than the old human-supported routes, but they were reliable and completely under non-human control. Dr. Nisa had established medical clinics that combined the healing traditions of multiple species. Her treatments were different from human medicine, but they were often more effective because they were tailored to work with natural biological processes rather than against them. The question was whether these small successes could grow fast enough to prevent total civilizational collapse. The galaxy was fracturing, but some individuals were proving that cooperation was still possible. As the archaeological team prepared to return from Earth with their discoveries, they carried both hope and warning. They had learned that humanity's departure was not punishment, but the final stage of a teaching process that had lasted for millennia. The question now was whether the current galactic civilization would learn the lesson in time, or whether it would join the ruins that littered human space, the remains of species that had failed to grow beyond their dependence. The signal came from the edge of known space, faint but unmistakably human. Communications specialist Zefek had been monitoring the deep space arrays when the transmission appeared on his screens. After 8 months of complete silence, humanity was finally speaking. All stations. This is Ambassador Jiho Park broadcasting from the research vessel Soul's Promise, came the familiar voice through the crackling static. To our friends in the galactic community, we offer this message of explanation and hope. Across the fractured galaxy, the few remaining communication networks carried the signal to whoever was still listening. On the emergency station that had replaced Nexus Prime, the surviving council members gathered in shocked silence. "We did not abandon you," Jiho continued. "We graduated you. For 50 years we served as your guides, your mediators, your problem solvers. But in doing so, we may have done you a disservice. We became a crutch that prevented you from learning to walk on your own." Chancellor Zaris, now operating from a cramped temporary facility, listened with a mixture of anger and understanding. Around the galaxy, similar scenes were playing out as species heard humanity's explanation for the first time. True strength does not come from dependence, even on friends who want to help. It comes from the knowledge that you can face any challenge and find your own solutions. We have watched you for decades, seeing capabilities and potential that you yourselves did not recognize. Dr. Veston smiled as she listened to the broadcast from her research station. She had been right about humanity's intentions. This was not abandonment. It was tough love on a galactic scale. Our departure was not easy for us, Jiho's voice continued. We cared deeply about the friendships we had built and the civilizations we had helped to nurture. But we also knew that as long as we remained, you would continue to look to us for answers instead of finding them within yourselves. The message was being received differently across the galaxy. Some species felt betrayed and angry. Others were beginning to understand the lesson humanity had tried to teach them. In the months since the departure, the galaxy had indeed fractured. Wars had broken out between former allies. Economic systems had collapsed. Entire civilizations had retreated into isolation. But something else had also happened. Innovation had exploded. The collaborative research group led by Dr. Veston had grown into a new kind of galactic organization. Instead of depending on a single species for solutions, they were learning to combine the unique strengths of many species. Their achievements were remarkable. Vik had revolutionized prosthetic technology by applying crystalline mathematics to Fenari bioengineering principles. His new designs were not only more effective than the original human versions, but they could be customized for any species. Captain Thoric had developed a navigation system that surpassed human technology by using the natural senses that different species had evolved. Venari could sense magnetic fields. Terrans could detect gravitational anomalies, and hydrozoans could navigate by bioelectric patterns. Dr. Nisa had made the most remarkable discovery of all. By combining the healing traditions of multiple species, she had developed treatments for genetic diseases that had been considered incurable. The key was understanding that each species had evolved different solutions to similar biological challenges. "We are learning to be strong together," she reported, to the growing alliance of species that had chosen cooperation over conflict. Not every species had made this choice. The Ursoid Empire continued its military expansion, claiming territory that had been under human protection. But they were finding that conquering worlds was easier than governing them. Without human administrative systems, their empire was becoming increasingly unstable. The crystalline collective remained isolated, but their isolation was becoming a weakness rather than a strength. Cut off from trade and technological exchange, their civilization was stagnating. "We are hearing reports of progress," Jiho's message continued. "Some of you have chosen the path of cooperation and innovation. You are developing technologies that improve on our designs. You are solving problems in ways we never considered. This is exactly what we hoped would happen." The archaeological expedition's discoveries had been shared with the Collaborative Alliance. The knowledge that humanity's departure was part of a larger cycle of cosmic mentorship had helped many species understand their situation differently. "We are not the first species to go through this," explained Dr. Veston during a broadcast to Alliance members. "According to the historical records, this is how civilizations grow. Each generation helps the next, then steps back to allow true independence." The Alliance had established its own capital on a neutral world called Haven. Representatives from 37 species worked together in a new kind of government based on cooperation rather than domination. Unlike the old Galactic Council, which had depended on human mediation, the Haven Alliance learned to resolve conflicts through direct negotiation between species. "It is harder this way," admitted Chancellor Zaris, who had joined the Alliance after the collapse of the old Council. "We cannot simply defer difficult decisions to human wisdom. We must find our own solutions." But the solutions they found were often better than what humanity had provided. Each species brought unique perspectives and capabilities to every problem. The diversity that had once been a source of conflict became a source of strength. General Craxon had transformed from a military commander into a coordinator of mutual defense. Instead of relying on human-supplied weapons and tactics, the Alliance species had learned to combine their natural abilities into devastating effectiveness. "Venari intuition can predict enemy movements," he explained. "Crystalline calculations can optimize defensive positions. Ursoid strength can build fortifications. Terran speed can provide reconnaissance. Together we are stronger than any human-equipped army." The technological breakthroughs continued to accelerate. Without human solutions to fall back on, species were forced to innovate. The results often surpassed what humanity had achieved. A joint project between hydrozoan biologists and Venari engineers had produced self-healing spacecraft that could repair damage automatically. Crystalline mathematicians, working with eternal archivists, had created data storage systems that could preserve information for millions of years without degradation. "You have become everything we believed you could be," Jiho's message continued. "And you have achieved things that we never could have accomplished alone. This is the true purpose of mentorship, not to create dependence but to inspire independence." As the Alliance grew stronger, it began reaching out to the species that had chosen conflict or isolation. The Ursoid Empire was invited to join as equals rather than conquerors. The Crystalline Collective was offered trade partnerships that respected their desire for autonomy. Some accepted these offers. Others did not. But the choice was theirs to make, without human pressure or guidance. 2 years after humanity's departure, long-range sensors detected familiar energy signatures approaching from deep space. The human fleet was returning, but they were not returning as saviors or leaders. "We return not as your guides, but as your peers," came the final part of Jiho's message. We are proud beyond measure of what you have achieved. You have proven that the galaxy does not need shepherds, it needs partners. The first human ship to dock at Haven Station was greeted by representatives from dozens of species. But the welcome was different from the old days. There was no desperate relief at humanity's return, no expectation that they would solve everyone's problems. Instead, there was curiosity about what humanity had learned during their absence, and excitement about sharing the innovations that the Alliance had developed. Ambassador Mina Lee stepped off the transport with tears in her eyes. "You have grown so much," she said to Dr. Veston. "When we left, you were dependent children. You have become magnificent adults." The reunion was emotional but equal. Humanity took their place as one voice among many in the new galactic order they had helped to create. Their role as cosmic gardeners was complete, at least for this cycle of civilization. In the years that followed, the Alliance continued to grow and develop. Not every species joined, and not every problem was solved peacefully. But the galaxy had learned the most important lesson humanity could teach, that true strength comes from within, and the greatest gift one can give is the confidence to stand alone. And somewhere in the deep archives of Haven Station, a new message was recorded for future generations. The humans came to us when we were young and taught us to reach for the stars. When they left, we learned to shine with our own light.